Welcome, everyone, to the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. This podcast is about inspiring you to get outdoors, showing you how to lighten your pack and build your confidence so you can start living your life full of adventure. I am Joe, and I have on here with me today Tayson. Welcome, Tayson. And we have Jesse from Backcountry Forward. Jesse, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. It's awesome to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. So I wanted to ask a lot about your recent GDT experience, but I think we're gonna get a little bit of the lay of the land first. What is Backcountry Forward, and what are you trying to do with it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, so my YouTube channel started actually with my first ever backpacking trip. I kind of had been one of those people who for years had always known I wanted to go backpacking, but was always stuck in that same routine of maybe one day, maybe someday. And some things happened in my life, some pretty big orientation changes in life and a relationship ending. And I just kind of got to the end of my wits where it was like, enough is enough. I'm done with saying maybe one day. I've always wanted to be that guy going backpacking. And so I'm doing it. I'm going backpacking. And so I called up my buddy. I said, we've always talked about this idea of doing a website or a blog of some sort. Like, let's get together, let's do something. It was his idea to start the YouTube channel. And we came up with this name of Backcountry Forward. We're moving towards the backcountry. We're heading forward towards adventure. And that kind of name just stuck. And we filmed our first ever backpacking trip. And it was just, we never put that footage out. It was just absolutely horrible. We filmed with the selfie facing camera, which doesn't have a stabilizer. And the whole thing's just this shaky, Blair Witch Project style backpacking trip. But yeah, it started with wanting to share my story and our story about backpacking and to encourage other people who are in that same kind of, well, maybe one day, maybe someday, and stop saying that, get out there and be backcountry forward, move towards the backcountry. And so, years later now, I don't claim to be an expert. We're all just out there learning and trying new things. But I want to really encourage other people as they're beginning on that journey. And I see a lot of people who are in that same place where they want to, they know it's who they kind of are meant to be, but they're just holding back. So the goal of Backcountry Forward is just to encourage them on that journey.
That's really cool. So tell us about, you said you wanted to go backpacking. Did you do much backpacking before you started this journey, at all? Or was it just you saw other videos and you were like, someday I'll do that?
Yeah, no, it was, so this is actually a really cool place where the GDT and my kind of origin story, if you will, kind of meet and creates this full circle. Long story short, my family was not a camping family, not a backpacking family at all. The one thing we did every year was we went on one family vacation. And so my family is what's called an approved home caregiving family. So I've always lived with somebody who has some form of disability as we've welcomed them into our family and we've taken care of them. And here in Alberta, there is this area in the Canadian Rockies, this place called William Watson Lodge, which is a place for accessibility into the mountains and into nature. And so Trinda, who's like a sister to me, is developmentally disabled. And William Watson Lodge created this opportunity for my family and for her, for us to go every year for a 1-week trip into the Canadian Rockies and stay in a nice cabin. And that was our family trip every year. And we would do day hikes. That's all we ever did. And short day hikes, an hour, 2 hours, a few hours. The longest we did once was 6 hours. And, but that I knew that area so well. And so, fast forward, I'm 9 years old and I'm sitting down and my dad's showing me on the big, rectangular map on the ground in our cabin, all the little day hikes that we've ever done. And I saw this, we're just in one little corner. And so I point to this hike, this trail way off in the corner of the map. And I said, Dad, what about that hike? Why don't we do that? And he says, oh, well, that's the backcountry. You have to go backpacking to do that hike. And that's the first time I ever even heard of the phrase or the word. And he explains to me what it was. He had done some backpacking when he was, a young adult. And fast forward a couple years later, and now he gives me the map and he says, Jesse, why don't you pick the trail that we go on? And I remember looking at the same map and just mesmerized by this like world of the unknown, way off in the distance, this untouchable area. And I look at that same little trail and I notice 3 words that say Great Divide Trail. So I asked my dad, like, what is this Great Divide Trail? And he doesn't really know. He kind of says, well, the Great Divide is this geological feature that separates the water flowing from the east to the west. And so some people must have created a trail. And anyways, fast forward years later, I've totally forgotten about that. And I finally get to this point where I say, it's time to go backpacking. And again, totally, I don't want to go too far on this rant. I could kind of rant, but I guess long story short, I go off with my buddy into this section of, again, this area of this map that I've just always wanted to explore. Totally forget about this thing called the Great Divide Trail. Totally forget all about it. We hike, unbeknownst to us, a portion of the Great Divide Trail, that same portion that I had pointed to my dad, a decade earlier. But we got to just this one little point. And I remember standing with my buddy and looking over this valley called the Palliser Valley. And I had always known that name, the Palliser Valley. And just everything inside of me wanted to go forward. But this would be the furthest point on our backpacking trip. And we were going to turn back. And at the end of that trip, it was a 3-day trip. And my buddy was like, I just can't wait to get home, sleep in my own bed. I'm so tired, And I was like the opposite. I said, I could stay out here for a week longer. Like, I feel like I was designed for this. And I always remembered that moment. All of a sudden, I just, like, the passion for backpacking just ignites in me. I'm watching PCT videos, Darwin on the Trail. I'm just digging into the content, learning what it means to be ultralight, because I was so not. And all of a sudden I stumble upon this video that pops up in my subscription feed or the news suggested feed called Canada's Great Divide Trail. And it rings that bell. I'm like, what is this? So I click on it, I'm watching, and it's a couple from here in Canada who they're doing the Great Divide Trail. And all of a sudden I'm watching first video and a second video, and I text my buddy, I'm like, there's a through hike in Canada. Did you know that? That's so cool. We should do this one day. And all of a sudden I get to this section. That was the same section that me and my buddy had walked just a few months earlier. And it was like, I was already starting to feel this, like, I've got to go here. I've got to go here. And then all of a sudden I see, I've been there. That's where I went backpacking. And it was just this, like, I'm doing this hike one day. And I had no idea how. It made no logical sense to me. Booking the time off just seemed impossible. But long story short, last summer, that's exactly what I did. So that's kind of the origin story, this beautiful moment of from full circle and being, on the trail and then standing at that same point that I had been at on my first backpacking trip, where I felt like I wish I could go further, and saying, now I get to go further, was just surreal. So that's kind of my origin story. And it all culminates this summer at the GDT.
Yeah, that is very surreal. So I guess we'll dive into your GDT experience. I guess for those at home who don't know what the GDT is, you explained it a little bit. How long of a trail?
Yeah, so it's 1,200 kilometers, which is 750 miles. I got all my little stats here just so I don't forget it. The one thing so most of your listeners, GDT is a less known through hike. It's considered one of the most rugged through hikes in North America. But it's lesser known, where you got the PCT where like thousands of people attempt it every year. The GDT this last summer had 75 people attempting it, and that was considered a big year. So it's a pretty lesser known hike, but it goes through some very popular places. Like, there are parts of the trail that are right through national park territory, and it goes through actually 3 national parks, several provincial parks. And it's got over 150,000 feet of elevation gain just through the entire trail. And it's something that can be done. Most people do it in about 2 months. You can take anywhere from a month and a half to 2.5 months. The hiking window up here in Canada is really short. So you kind of have to start late June, if not early July. Even late June's pretty early. You're going to be hitting some snow up in the higher passes. And then by mid-September, end of September, if you're lucky, if it's a good year. Even me, towards the end of August, I started July 4th. Independence Day. And by the end of August, I had hit a massive dump of snow. And so, you know, in the Rockies, it can snow up in Canadian Rockies, it can snow year round. You know, I've been snowed on in the middle of July and even in August. So it's got 7 sections, unlike kind of other through hikes where they have short sections that you hit towns often, right? You got, you know, the longest stretch on the AT and the PCT without hitting a town is, I think, 5 days. Whereas on the GDT, most of the sections are like 7, 8. I have some friends who had to do a 12-day section. So they're good legs. You know, there are short sections. There's one section that's about 65 miles, so done in about 4 days. And the longest section is about 129 miles. And so, yeah, it's just spans kind of this, it doesn't go the entire width of the Canadian Rockies because technically they go a little bit further. But up in that territory, it's, you know, it's just total, there's not even trails, although there's people doing some scouting. So it starts, this is again, the CDT, which people probably are familiar with. It starts exactly where the CDT ends. So people often call it, you know, the younger sister, or the wild younger sister of the CDT.
Yes, possibly. Could you just do like a super hike?
Pardon?
Yeah. Could you do a super hike from the CDT through the GDT?
Yeah, absolutely. And some people have done it. There was a guy named Peanut, Andrew, I can't remember his last name. He did it, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, started it in New Mexico, went all the way up, ended at the Kakwa Lake Provincial Park.
Just, you know, 700 miles here, 700 miles there. Just add it on, just tack it on, keep going. Why not?
It's true. Once you've done the CDT, 750 miles added onto it is like, you know, I think an extra like quarter. I don't know if it's even less than that. So,
well, I mean, how did you prepare for this hike?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like I said, going back to that idea of the origin story, the past, you know, few years had been 5 years have been preparation for this. And I kind of, planned it that way. Not so much like I never thought I'd actually be able to do the GDT. Like it was a dream come true in reality, but I always knew like I needed to get into things slowly. So I started with a 3-day trip. That was kind of like a base camp trip where we stayed in one spot and did day hikes. Then we went and did our, you know, a few trips that were genuinely like 3-day trips, and then expanded to like a week-long trip. And then this year did the GDT. So that was kind of the long game, was honing my skills, doing tons of trips, winter trips, everything, just training, honing in my skills as a backpacker. And then going into the trip, there's tons of preparation. Because there's not as many towns, you can't just resupply in a town. You have to plan your resupplies in advance and mail boxes to yourself, full of all the food you're going to get. So that's a big part of the preparation process. The permitting up here in Canada, it's a total different situation. It's not like you get one permit, you get to do the length of it. You got to create an itinerary that's like day by day by day. And you've got to book like every campsite, not every night, but like enough nights that it's like if you fall behind on one night, you kind of got to get caught up, because in 3 nights you've got a permit and you can't camp in the national parks without a permit. So you really break down the GDT as a trail as a whole, learning the whole geography. You're poring over maps, you're reading a book. There's an excellent book out there that's a guidebook, and you just pore over it to kind of prepare yourself mentally for what you're going to be experiencing. And then physically, I had an amazing physiotherapist. I actually have a broken back, and so that was a pretty big important thing. So Cairn Physiotherapy, Kristen Norwick, she had hiked the trail the year prior, and she's a physiotherapist, so she was just excellent. So I hired her as my personal trainer. She set me up with a bunch of cardio, a bunch of core strengthening and balance strengthening things, and I was training in the months prior to. Probably not nearly enough, to be honest.
No.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Everyone is always like, I'm going to train so much. And then once you actually hit the trail, you're like, no amount of training could have prepared me for this. I know that your guys' highline was, you guys were training for that for weeks, months prior to. Do you feel like you trained enough?
Geez, I don't know. I think I did for highline, but we did one just before that. That was a fast pack. And that one, I could have used more training for sure. I mean, when you get into like the running and stuff, that's just, but I think the longer you go, you know, the more exponential any injury becomes, right? So like
Yeah.
one little tweak in your foot, and 2 weeks later, it's a massive issue. Whereas if you're getting off trail in 4 days or something, like might not have even fully developed into what it's going to be because you just don't get that rehab time, right? So
Yep. Yeah, and the foot injury, you nailed it. Actually, on the third last section, my shoe broke, and there was this kind of a chaos where I was supposed to get a replacement set of shoes, and my roommate sent the guy who's meeting up with me for a single day he sends me my winter boots. So I get to the place where I'm rendezvousing with this guy, and I'm like, first things first, Bob, give me my shoes. I'm so ready for my shoes. My shoes are about to fall apart. And he's like, I got them. And he pulls out my winter hiking boots. And I'm like, you're joking, right? Like, I legitimately thought it was a joke. I thought he was like, I'm going to give Jesse winter boots as a joke. And then I'll pull out his rentals. And he's like, nope, that's what your roommate gave me. And I'm like, I told him like I had a brand new box of gray trail runners. And he gave me this old ratty tatty pair of winter hiking boots.
That fascinates me because I want to hear what the next days were like. I had an experience this last year where I like took my winter boots on a hike and it blew me away, like the difference. So I kind of want to hear, like, did you have to go hiking in those boots then, or what did you do?
No, and I don't know. This is one of those things where it's like, I don't know what would have been the right decision. Those boots were old and their grip were horrible. So I decided I'm going to push through with the shoes that I have. They have a few holes in them. They're starting to fall apart, but I probably have one section left in them. And I had actually probably about half a section left in them. So I was an 8-day stretch. And on day 5, my right shoe just totally broke. I actually fell. I had a serious fall down a little gully and scraped up my side pretty bad. And so at first I thought my foot was injured because of that. Because that injury, my foot hurt, not only for the rest of the trail. I had 2 weeks left on trail after that, but it hurt for about a month afterwards. And I honestly didn't know what it was until after trail. I was like, why does my foot still hurt? And I realized that 1.5 days of walking with a broken shoe is what did it. I think it just really messed up my muscles. And so then I got brand new shoes in Jasper, the last town before heading to the end. And those shoes were also awful. They were too tight. and I thought that was the issue. And so I switched out shoes one more time. My girlfriend met up with me and I switched shoes then. And that helped a little bit, but my right foot was still kind of hurting all the way till the very end. And like I said, for weeks afterwards. And I'm almost positive that's the issue. And it just goes to show how fragile our feet are. Like we take them for granted. Because I remember.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I had one other trip years ago where I had a broken shoe and I had to hike up a mountain and then hike out the next day on a broken shoe. And I remember that same thing for a week afterwards, my foot was hurting. And so that's the only thing I can think of as to why my foot still hurt for weeks after just a day and a half of hiking with a totally busted shoe. Yeah.
Well, I mean, something that I've learned and seen quite a bit over the last year, 2 years is, if you get even one muscle that starts to tighten up because maybe it's a new shoe or you're overcompensating because your shoe's broken, right? And that muscle tightens up, it throws off all of your joints, right? So for me, my IT band on my right leg seems to just want to constantly be tight. And I can attribute that to a few things, but either way, if I start to run and my knee hurts, I can immediately stop and stretch my IT band, start to run again, and my knee won't hurt. Right. Because it's just that torque on that. So yeah, hiking with a broken shoe, you're definitely going to be compensating one way or another. Your foot's going to be hitting different and you could totally tighten up a muscle. And if you don't know that or know how to, it could be a plethora of things, right? You could even get hairline fractures, going on your toes. And, but yeah, that's really interesting. I do want to cut back though.
Sure.
I wanted to cut back to just the trail itself, because as you're describing this, it kind of led me to some questions, and I wanted to know if you knew kind of the answer. It does sound like a rugged trail, right? People definitely don't realize the difference between going, 5 days between stops and 8 days between stops, right? Weight, the more weight you build up, the more exponentially heavy it gets when you start out, right? And then if you've got a longer water carry and you've got 8 days, and You know what I mean? It just gets exponentially harder on your body. So I think that's really interesting. But you also mentioned on, like, say, the elevation gain being 150,000 feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you know how that stacks up to any other of the through hikes that people might know down here?
I actually don't. That was something that literally I was looking at my stats sheet and I saw it and I was like, I imagine it probably doesn't stack up much because of the distance of the other hikes, the other long trails.
Right. Yeah.
But
I was really doing some Googling, and that was the first thing. It's like, oh, it's hard to tell because these are longer hikes, right? But I don't know. That's something I'd be really interested in, because it does look like you're just going through some really rugged, steep terrain.
I'd be really curious to see how it stacks up to something like the JMT, the John Muir Trail, because that would be a more similar terrain, high elevation. But yeah, that's one of the things that makes the Canadian Rockies so unique in the Rocky Mountain Range, is that they're not at the base elevation is quite low. And so you go up and you come down, and you go up and you come down. Like, it's not like in Colorado, the Rockies, you've got higher Rockies in Colorado by a long shot. But when you go up, you don't come all the way back down as low. And so, the highest point on the GDT is actually only 8,500 feet, just under 8,500 feet. So it's not that high of a place, but on the day that you hit it, depending on how you work your itinerary, you've gone over two major passes before hitting that point, and you've probably got another two afterwards. Afterwards. So it's a total of 3 in that day. And there's some days, like there's one section of trail, unfortunately they just closed down this year, called the 6 passes alternate, and you go over 6 high rocky passes in one day, and it's just wild. So yeah, you're constantly up and down, up and down. It's even when you hit a ridge, you're on a nice ridge for an hour or two, you come off the ridge, you got to reascend all the way back up the next ridge, you're on that for another hour or two. So that's where a lot of the elevation.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't mean it's not like crazy rugged country too, right? Because for those of you that haven't traveled a lot north and south, 10,000 feet down here might be like the tree level, the tree line, right? But for you guys, it might be what, like 5,000 feet that far north?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is. It would probably be around, I would estimate, I'm just throwing this number out, but probably around 6,000 or 7,000. Yeah. The 8,000 would definitely above.
You're still getting into that high country, rocky, jagged terrain, even at those types of elevations, you're still getting really into that stuff. So that's hard miles. People really misjudge how much elevation slows you down. I can't remember when I was listening to something, but a Thru-Hiker was talking about, he's like, well, what's your hardest day on trail? And everyone expects someone to say, like, it's the day I hiked 35 miles in a day, but it's like, it's really not. It's the day that I hiked 22, but I was hiking through this type of country. You know what I mean? It kicked my butt way more than a 35-mile day here.
Yep. Yeah. And even the trail itself, I think that's one of the things, like navigation is a huge thing. And so those micro decisions, those weigh on you way more than when you're on like a nice paved, national park trail where you've got a map or a direction that says, hey, turn left here. Hey, turn, and you're on the right trail. Whereas on the GDT, you literally can get to points, some people overblow this. Some people really make it out to be like, it's just wilderness crossing the whole way. And it's, for the most part, it's not. There is a trail the whole way, which was really comforting to me because I honestly expected it to be cross country most of the time, but it wasn't. But it's still like if you miss a turnoff, there's section B is crisscrossed with ATV trails. And sometimes you follow the ATV trail and sometimes you have to walk across the ATV trail, part some branches and some bushes, and then the trail exists right there. But if you're not paying attention, you just walk 5 kilometers down the ATV trail and you're like, you look at your map and you're like, oh, I just totally missed it. And so I did that actually, not in that section, but on the last section, I walked, about 5 kilometers. And all that there was to mark that I was supposed to turn left was this like 3 rocks piled in tall grass. And I saw it. I took a picture of it. It was like, oh, and I thought it was like, hey, you're on the right trail. Keep going. And so I kept going. And sure enough, there was this, not even a trail. There was just I had to bushwhack through, well, not bushwhack, but walk through tall grass. And then all of a sudden kind of came across where there was some semblance of a goat trail.
I'm kind of going back to the elevation gain and loss. I don't know if this website's accurate, but Appalachian Trail looks like the clear winner on the elevation gain. It's like 515,000 feet over a distance of 2,175 miles. Pacific Crest Trail, much less so. In fact, I think you're probably averaging more on the GDT. Doing the quick, horrible math in my head, so I might be totally wrong about this, but 315,000 feet over 2,600 miles on Pacific Crest Trail. Interestingly
That's
enough.
really interesting that the AT is higher. That's not what I would have expected. I have talked to people who have done the AT and the GDT, and like the nice thing of the AT is that the trail is just clear cut. You're just going, and you're below tree line for most of it. But what I've heard is that there's no switchbacks. When you go up on the AT, you just go straight up. Yeah. Whereas most other places, and even the GDT, where the GDT Association is developing the trail more, they've cut in a lot of switchbacks, which really does help. Really does help.
Yeah, that's what I've heard about the Appalachian Trail. It's just like up and down, up and down, up and down. When PCT in comparison, and it looks like it based upon how many feet of elevation gain, it's just generally more steady.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole route. So that's interesting. There you go, Tayson.
That surprises.
Awesome. There's your stats.
Surprises the heck out of me. I would have thought like AT was the lowest elevation, PCT probably following that, and then the CDT just smoking that, like completely, because you're just in the mountains the whole time, right? So
yeah, that's what I would have thought too.
Just rolling hills will do it, huh? Yeah. Or not just hills, but I mean mountains out there on the AT. Interesting.
Wow.
Don't insult the people on the East Coast.
I don't know if we want to insult make but mountains, that's a loose term.
Mountains to them, what I
Yeah, there you go.
No.
Well,
we're gonna get some email here.
You have to protect your company's reputation. I don't have to protect mine.
Yeah, you tell them how it is, Jesse.
Real quick, we were talking about shoes just a second ago, and I just want to take this moment to plug Outdoor Vitals gear. It is in the description of this podcast episode and on our YouTube channel descriptions. If you guys want to check out what we have to offer here at Outdoor Vitals in terms of ultralight gear, please do so. And Jesse, I got to ask you, favorite pieces of gear, least favorite pieces of gear.
Are you setting me up to plug Outdoor Vitals?
Sounds like a setup here.
Sounds like a setup.
You are not required to do so.
No, I will, because legitimately, I had two standout pieces of gear that really stood out, and they kind of, my appreciation for both of them switched, because at the start, anyways, long story short, it was my tent. I was using the Durston Gear X-Mid one-person tent, which is kind of a newer tent to the market. Not for those people who know it, they'll know it, and for those people who don't, they've probably never heard of it. But it's just a really excellently designed one-person tent, and I love that tent. So really, that stood out to me. But it was a really hot summer, so for the majority of the first half of the summer, I was just in nothing but a sun hoodie that I was using. And so then towards the second half, it started getting a little chillier in that early August. And I brought out the old Ventus, which I flippin' love. I just think not enough people know or care about the Ventus, but it just outshone. And so I would say everything concluded, the Ventus became my favorite piece of gear on the trail, surpassing the tent, just because of how essential as a piece it came for the second half. Yeah, I guess my tent is pretty essential too, but just I used it every day. It was so nice to be walking through, wet willows and getting them brushing up against me, and I'm getting wet, but still warm. And I was never concerned with getting wet in the Ventus, because it dries out just so fast. It's insane how fast it dries out. So it became one of the key pieces. It's raining a little bit. Don't care about taking off my backpack, throwing on my rain gear. There was a time where I was hiking with some other people and they were putting on the rain gear. I'm just like, You know, unless it's a downpour, I rarely wore my rain jacket that I brought. So I just, and then again, on those high mountain ridges, winds picking up, it's howling up there, and I've just got the Ventus, and I'm happy as a pig in mud. So anyways, I love the Ventus. I think it's an excellent piece. I think it's one of those, it's a weird piece that I don't think people understand what it's like until they get it and put it on, and they're like, whoa, this is totally not what I was expecting. So that's by far one of my favorite pieces of gear from the trail.
Yeah, don't plug it too hard. We don't have enough inventory for that, Jesse.
I mean, it was okay. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, it's been a really cool piece to see get rolled out, because the demand, once it started to get in people's hand, shot up really unexpectedly for us. And so we've been doing our best to get as many of them on the way as we can or whatnot. But it does kind of beg the question. It sounds like you're kind of having to switch out some gear. What do you feel like your pack weight started at when you started that trail? Did you weigh your pack or know what you were kind of starting that trail with?
Yeah. So now I'm trying to remember exactly. I'm assuming you mean base weight, not like I could give you my total pack weight because I weighed it throughout the time. I don't know if I weighed my base weight mid trail. It did change a little bit, but I started out fairly heavy, probably heavier than most people would expect. But one of the big things that you need on the GDT is just a plethora of clothing. I did end up actually bounce boxing some stuff ahead of me, because it was like, I don't need these legging thermals because it was just so hot at the beginning. But yeah, so I started just under 20 pounds. So I think it's like 19 and change.
Is that like with food and water or without food and water?
No, that was without food and water. And so it was, like I said, it was a little heavy. I was, it's funny. You get every type on the GDT. I passed by some people and they're like massive, like horse packs on their back,
100 liter pack. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's other people who've got like a knapsack, and you're just like, how do you have everything in there that you need? But yeah, so for me, I was kind of in that mid range, which is like, generally speaking, I can go lower in the Canadian Rockies. It's pretty hard to go lower than 15 pounds. You can. There's some people who go down to 10 pounds, but just because of the temperature, you're always looking at a little bit of a warmer setup, and that's what adds the weight. So I had extra clothing that I ended up bouncing up ahead. So I probably at the lightest got probably down to about 17 pounds. I could maybe say lower, but I can't guarantee that. So that was probably.
So two things I want to dig on here. One, a lot of times when people look at base weights, they're like, these guys are 10 pounds. Why can't you be 10 pounds? Like, yeah, that's like in a 45-degree quilt with like a sun hoodie. And you know what I mean? Like, they don't need anything, right? As far as layers. So sometimes they misjudge that. But what did you lose? Like, what did you get out there on the trail and it's like, I don't need this. I don't need this. Like, there's 3 pounds in my pack, basically, is what you said that you decided you didn't need by the end, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to have to, I wouldn't say that I didn't need them, because I did bring some of those pieces back. The biggest one was I had a pretty bulky set of leggings, of a
fleece or something.
Yeah, there we go. Fleece leggings. So fleece leggings, I actually ended up putting both I had Dragonwool and leggings. So I had both of those because I wanted my Dragonwool to be my hiking leggings, and I wanted my thermal, the fleece leggings to be my sleeping leggings if I needed those. So I ended up bouncing both of those up, and right there, that was probably almost a pound there. My Dragonwool hoodie, I bounced ahead. So it was almost all clothing. Trying to think if there was a few other little things. Like I had a koozie for my pot that I got rid of. I had, I'm just trying to think.
Had your like hydro flask, double wall steel.
Yeah, no. Yeah, steel hydro flask. No. Yeah, clothing, and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank of some of the other things I did.
Well,
I
think more could come up if we just actually started the story. So I do want to hear though, you're starting this trail, you're literally starting day one of this dream hike. You're an incredibly positive person, so I'm sure you're just beaming from ear to ear. But really, what's going on behind your big smile there? As you're starting this trail.
Oh yeah, that's you're calling me out. You're calling me out. Day one was rough. To be 100% honest. One of the things, so on about, generally speaking, on about day three, has how most day two or day three, depending on how you hit it. You climb this mountain called La Coulette, and it's kind of this first really hard mountain. But what I've kind of come to realize is that there's another mountain that you climb before that, and it's the emotional mountain, and it's like T minus day one and day zero, where you're like emotionally all of a sudden like I'm starting this, I'm actually doing this, and in typical Jesse, leave too many things to the last minute. So we had gone, me and my girlfriend and now fiance, but girlfriend at the time, and her brother and sister and brother-in-law went camping. And so I hadn't fully loaded up my backpack. I had brought a big box of a bunch of things, and we had to drop off some of our supply boxes on the way. And so day one, I'm actually packing my backpack. And I'm packing up food. This is the first time I've put all my food in my backpack. First time I put all my food in my Ursack, and it barely fits. And okay, oh man. So this is technically day two. Day one was we went to the border, the US border, and back. It's a 12-kilometer, so whatever. That's like 8 to 10 mile hike. I can't remember my conversions there. And less than that, probably 8 mile hike. And then you come back to this little township campsite area. And so that was technically day one. But day two, which is I'm actually heading into the backcountry for the first legitimate time, I'm packing everything in. And we had used my canister stove for some hot chocolate at camp. And so as we're packing, in the insanity of having like this total yard sale and me trying to fit everything in there, and like legit, no pride. I cried a couple times where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, babe. Like, what have I gotten myself into? I could barely fit my food in here. Sorry about that. Yeah, comedy of errors. So I had heard that Parmesan cheese is great because it lasts. Bring Parmesan cheese on the trail. So I had taken this big block of Parmesan cheese, cut it all up, wrapped it in saran wrap, threw it in my food boxes. It was in the middle of a heat wave. And over that 3 days of camping, those Parmesan cheeses leaked their oil over all my food.
Oh.
So we are packing up. We are going into the outhouse, like the bathrooms there. They have a faucet, washing my peak refueled bags off because they just smell like Parmesan cheese. And I'm heading into the grizzly territory.
Yeah, you're in the heart of grizzly country.
Yeah. Finally get to camp that night, and things pick up there. And I'm set up everything, and I get down to eat. And as we were packing things up earlier that day, I had 2 canisters, and one we had used for camping, so it was partially used. So I had put it with the camping stuff, and I pulled out another canister. And in the midst of packing everything up, I found this canister. I was like, oh, this was our camping canister. Here, babe, you can put this in the car. And so I get to camp on day one, ready to eat meal, pull out my stove, no fuel.
Oh.
I put my fuel there. I'm starting a 7-day leg or 7-day leg with no fuel. The catchphrase of Backcountry Forward is keep moving forward. And I had this word that I had for all of last year. It's a Greek word and it's hupomone. And it means endurance. It's often translated endurance, but not the kind of like grit your teeth and just push through kind of endurance. It's the idea of optimistic, positive endurance. I always say endurance with a smile. It's hopeful, optimistic endurance. Sometimes it's used for this idea of patience, but like positive patience, waiting patiently, enduring patiently. And so that hupomone was kind of my word for the trail. And so I'm just at my first camp, and I'm like, oh, hupomone. Fortunately, there were some campers who were hiking out the other direction. And I thought I just got to swallow my pride. And they were already set up, and I knew they were leaving the next day. So I went over to them and like, I don't have fuel. I'm starting this through hike. Do you guys have any spare canister of fuel or something? And the guy's like, yeah, I have a whole fuel canister I didn't even use yet. And it's like one of the big ones, but I'm like, whatever, I'll take it.
Right.
So honestly, that first day was emotional. I was pretty distraught the first day.
I prepared for 5 years and now I feel ill prepared. Like,
yeah,
what's
absolutely.
going on
And
here?
that was the question
Confidence
of the
shook.
whole, yeah, shook. The whole like weeks leading up to it was this constant, like, what have I got myself into? What have I got? Do I have what it takes? Like I'm a fool if I think that I have what it takes. And people who have done this trail, like this is considered one of the most rugged trails in North America. And people who have done this trail, I 3 years ago, a lady who's done 10 through hikes, she's done the Triple Crown twice, and she's done a bunch of other international through hikes. And she did the GDT, she yo-yoed it. And she said, by far, it's the hardest through hike she's ever hiked. And I'm like, and I'm little me starting this thing. What have I gotten myself into? But that just goes to show it's a testament of, I think, one of the most important things that you don't pack on the trail, but that you have to have is the right mindset. And when you're doing a long trail, mindset is everything. And I said, actually, on the GDT page, I was encouraging some of the people who are doing it this year. I said, you can hike a lot further with broken shoes than you can with a broken spirit. Because if you have a bad attitude or broken spirit, you're just down and it doesn't matter if everything is going right, you'll give up. But if you've got the attitude that says, hey, I'm keep moving forward, hoopamone, I just got to get through another day. What's the positive in this moment? What's the plus? What's the pro? And that was something I often had to ask myself, is like, what am I happy about? What's the next thing that's coming that's going to be beautiful about today? And it got me through a whole lot of garbage.
Well, speaking of garbage, what are some of your lowest lows, and maybe we can reverse that with what's your lowest low of the trip and the highest high?
Yeah, so the lowest low, I'm going to throw in a third one too, just if I may, because there's also the hardest hard,
okay,
which is different than the lowest low, because the hardest hard was also one of the bestest bests. But the lowest low was probably on that first section. So I started out just comedy of errors, right? That first day was rough. The first day, or the second day, was a fairly short day. It was only about 14 kilometers. So that's just under 10 miles, not much. And had 3,000 feet of elevation gain, not much. And yet I was beat. I was exhausted. And I knew the next day I had to double that. I had almost twice as much elevation and almost twice as much distance because I couldn't get a campsite booked. So I had to go an extra long distance. And I was just, here it is, end of day 2. I'm exhausted and I've got to do twice what I did today. And that was also the day where I discovered that I had a major gear issue, which was that my backpack, the frame, had kind of pushed through the bottom of my backpack. That was totally my issue. There's this little slot that you're supposed to slide the frame into, and it has that little pocket, and I missed that little pocket. So it was just the frame, the metal rod was just rubbing against the exterior of the backpack and pushed right through. And so I spent that night trying to duct tape it and wad it all together. And I thought I had fixed it, but I literally sat at the table just, again, like, what have I got myself into? I've got to do twice the distance tomorrow that I did today. I'm exhausted and my backpack's broken. And so on the note of so that was probably one of the lowest lows. And the next day, I did get through that day. And that was probably the highest high. Was I honestly started that day thinking, I don't know if I can do this. And I might have to camp early ahead of where I was. I might have to break the law technically and camp someplace else. I don't know if I'll be able to do it. And what's really cool is how, I don't know if I should spoil this for those who watch the video, but whatever, probably not many will. But I get to this point actually where there's an extra camp pad at a campsite earlier, and a couple say, hey, we don't need this camp pad. We booked it. You can stay here. And I said to myself, no, I've got to push this day because I got to prove to myself that I can do this. And so I push and I get to that campsite at like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And that was just like, I did this. I can do the Great Divide Trail. And promptly the next day I get to camp and my backpack, that patchwork job that I had done, falls apart just epically. My shoulders had been hurting me. And so I'm like, what's going on? Look at my backpack. And the next day after that is this La Coulette Peak. It's this huge peak. Everyone talks about it. It's this infamous challenge that you just got to go up a steep slope. And so my spirit at the end of that day, I had to walk out to a little resort town and decide what I was going to do, whether or not I was going to go forward, whether or not I was trying to get a new backpack, what that was going to look like. And I got to this little hostel, and that because was kind of one of the lowest points where it was like, here I am, not even a week done, and it's been a comedy of errors. And am I gonna push on? And I honestly didn't know the answer at that moment. But then just everything came together. I met some acquaintances that were friends of friends that I happened to meet once before at a wedding, and we got along so well. And they happened to live in the area. My friend reached out to them because he's their friend. They came, picked me up. I got my backpack, got back on trail that day, and continued on and finished that section. And so that was just a roller coaster of a ride for that first section. And so that was really tough. But on that note of high of the highs, getting to that Twin Lakes campground on that night, the third day there, third night of being like, I wasn't sure if I could even do that day. And getting there, I remember like recording myself being like, I can do this. I just did that. I can do the Great Divide Trail. And that was super high. The other high of the high that I'll never forget is, I alluded to it earlier, is that moment of standing at Palliser Valley, that first point that I went backpacking on my first ever backpacking trip, and remembering, and I cried at that moment and made a little video for my dad, because in so many ways, my dad had fostered so much of my love for adventure, and standing there thinking, I wanted to keep moving forward the first time I got here, and now I can. And so hike down. So those are two highlights I'll never forget. Just this huge amount of self-confidence building and determination.
Wow. Well, we're about 5 minutes away from our time.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. Thanks so much for listening to all the stories.
No, you're a wonderful storyteller. This is amazing. I wish we had twice as much time to be able to pick your brain. I guess real quick, was it worth it? Are you considering doing like another through hike like this?
Was it worth it? Yes. I had this phrase that I coined on the trail, and I said, the Great Divide Trail will challenge you, it will push you to your limits, and then it will demand more. But it is also so incredibly worth the experiences along the way. And that challenge just is so worth everything. The confidence that I built this summer, the resilience, it's literally changed my life. And I love it. And so, am I going to do another big through hike? One of the big lessons I kind of learned on the trail was probably not in that typical sense. I'd love, there's ideas of doing like the PCT maybe one day. I'd really like to do the JMT, and the JMT seems short now in comparison to the GDT. But I'd love to do some longer trails like that and do some explorative trails. There's new sections even along the GDT or past the GDT that people are talking about exploring and creating a route that goes further. I'd love to do some of those things. And one day I'd really love to do the GDT again. And I think when I retire, or maybe just when I'm older and empty nester, I'll go back and I'll do the GDT again.
Well, what are you working on next?
Yeah, right now the big thing that I'm working on is the GDT video series. That has been a journey. I have over 10,000 video files, or files, I should say, that I am. Your face. Yeah, you're the editor, so you understand. And I'm working with an editor, and so that's just been it's been a journey of even working together and learning how to do that. There's been some miscommunications and some misunderstandings that we've had to kind of reconsider and work through anyways. I won't get into all of that, but that's the big thing that I'm working on. Is I want to wrap up the GDT series and then a whole bunch of videos that go with that. I'm getting married which I'm stoked about this year. I'm getting married.
Congrats on that.
In June. So yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate, you reached out, Tayson, and that really meant a lot. And so she's never gone backpacking. So my slogan on the channel is getting beginners backpacking. I don't know if that will be this year or next year, but I really look forward to taking on her.
You're in such a better position than I was when I got married and my wife had never been backpacking, because my wife became the guinea pig for early Outdoor Vitals gear, as well as like all the other gear that I was piecing together back then. And so, I mean, she slept on like the worst of the worst pads, tested the newest bags that were not, and she kind of took a break from backpacking for years. So my advice to you, man, is just make her have the most amazing experience, because you know how to do that now, right? So well, you're in a good position.
I had originally tried to convince her to come on the GDT with me. I said we could elope, and then we could do the GDT together. And she's like, not a chance. In hindsight,
not only no, but maybe not even after now. What are you thinking?
Basically, not only no, but never.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'm excited for that video series. I really am. I think that trail sounds so amazing, and I think maybe some of the things you're saying where you're like, I don't know if I'll ever do it again. I mean, that's a lot of times where I align, is like, I've got a wife, I got kids, I got a business, and it's just not super feasible for me to be able to go through hiking, even though the same call is there for me to go and just be outside as much as I can. And I'm still, anyway, so I am looking forward to that one. I think it's cool that it's something that's maybe slightly shorter than others, but also sounds like it could be harder. That just sounds like such an interesting through hike to me, especially. So I'm gonna be really interested to watch that series. So if everyone listening to this, make sure you're subscribed to his channel and ready for that. When do you think that those could possibly start dripping out?
Yeah, that's kind of been the constant.
Yeah.
Story. I was really working on a January release, and long story short, I got kind of the first draft, and it was like, oh, this is so far from where we need to be with this, that we pretty much had to go back to we had to go back to square zero, square one. So it's been kind of a test of hupamone, even in that, to be honest, of like, okay, just gotta keep wrapping my head around that. And it's easy to get discouraged. So I'm really hoping, I mean, I don't want to, I've set so many dates now that I'm like, I don't even know if I want to say that, but I am really hoping that we're going to start getting that out here. For my goal, like I want to get that first quarter. So before March is kind of my birthday month. So I'd really like, I probably won't be finished the series by end of March, but I'd like to be getting those out here beginning of March at the very latest. But I mean, we're already halfway through February, so it's a process.
Well, when they come out, where can they find them?
Yeah, absolutely. Backcountry Forward on YouTube. That's the best place to find me as far as the video and the content's there. But also on Instagram, especially if somebody wants to message me or ask me any questions. I'm not on Instagram a ton, but that's the best place to reach out to me. And you can, again, Instagram Backcountry Forward. Leading up to the series and throughout the series, I'm going to be trying to do a lot more posts of pictures, from the trail. So because there's a whole story even there that, the videos won't always fully be able to capture, but some of the photography will. So that's kind of the plan there.
Awesome. I think you got some pretty good, beautiful photography on Instagram there.
No, thank you.
I looked through that stuff.
Yeah. I feel like we can go on forever. Like I would go on forever just asking all the details of like planning and all that. But I have one question I just want to ask before I'll let Joe finish off with whatever he wants to, which is what do you think makes you different? Like you kind of touched on it a little bit, but like there's a lot of people that start through hikes, a lot of people that don't finish them, right? Preparation's an aspect, gear could be an aspect, expectations can be an aspect, but like you also touched on the mental side, right? Like why did you finish and the bigger percentage of people that start don't? Like what made you different?
That's a good question. So it's a personal question. If I'm 100% honest, it has a lot to do, and I'm not saying this just lightly or tritely, it has a lot to do with my faith. starting my journey into backpacking was something that I really felt like God kind of led me into, because it was in so many ways I had held myself back, and kind of had held myself back from doing a lot of things that I knew I wanted to do and the things that would bring me life. And I think he got me to this season where it was just like, I'm going to bring you into this journey where you're going to actually start doing the things that matter to you. And I'm going to show you that those things actually matter, because you matter, Jesse. And so even coming up to the GDT, there was a time where I thought about pulling the plug, and, I was dating and I thought I'd like to get married this summer. Maybe I'd rather get married than doing the GDT. And I just felt in my heart, and as I prayed about things, God being like, you don't get that right. I gave this to you. This is my gift to you. This summer is my gift to you. And you don't get to just throw that out the window to do something else that's good, but like, this is our time. And I remember even coming to the end of the trail that I didn't talk about it too much, but there was that snow day where I honestly thought that, again, that might be the end of the trail. It was over a foot of snow. I had some high elevation passes I had to go through. I had to come off trail. And I honestly thought, if it doesn't melt in the next day or two, like, this is it. I won't get to that end point. And I remember just feeling, and even before that, coming to this point where I was kind of like, I felt like I had gotten out of the trail what I needed to get out of it. And I was like, okay, I think I'm done. But the voice, the emphasis that I felt was, you're done, but you're not finished. And there's something that we're gonna do together in the finishing, and the like getting to that end point. And so that's that word hupomone. It comes from the Bible, and it was my walk with Him, that journey with God that I really felt transformed me and made it so that I could push through. And I was coming off on the last day, and there was a guiding hunter who was in the area. And he said, he saw me, he had seen like 6 different thru-hikers coming off the trail. And he said, you're the only one. It looks like you're just starting this journey. You're walking, you've got a spring in your step, you've got a smile on your face. Everyone else is like grumbling and like, "Ugh," and you're just like, and he's like, you look so happy. And I was like, honestly, I am. Like, I just feel overjoyed. So I think for me personally, it's a personal answer, but it has a huge part to do with my relationship with God and my walk with Jesus.
Well, thank you, Jesse, for sharing. Sorry to cut you off, Jason.
Oh, just because I appreciate you sharing that. I think that there's a lot of lessons for us to learn and all of that. I also feel like we touched on a lot of like the difficulty of all this. So I think it's really cool that you kind of touched on the ending, but I would also just again say, make sure you guys watch this video, because I'm sure you're going to see the highs of highs that came throughout that whole journey as well. So
yeah, you'll see some crying too. That's for sure.
That's just type 2 fun, Jesse. That's just a part of it.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Jason, for coming on to the Live Ultralight podcast. Guys, if you're listening, please feel free to send your comments, questions about backpacking, cool outdoor stories, or ideas for future episode topics to liveultralightpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on our YouTube, on our new little YouTube channel videos as well. And remember, guys, leave positive iTunes reviews. We will read them on the show. This has been the Live Ultralight podcast. We'll see you on the trail.